Hello, everyone. Welcome to Realization Hub and this energy update about the new moon in Cancer. This moon is very sweet and tender in some ways. It's a beautiful heart opening, and it does bring about some healing that we can do, and some kind of ways we can really smooth some things out, really open up to a new way of creatively expressing ourselves and bringing our creations into the world in a way that can really be seen. So I'm very excited about this new moon. Of course, it has its challenges. So let's go ahead and get into it. But first, before I begin, I want to say hello to those of you that might not know me. My name's Michelle. I'm a professional intuitive. I've been doing professional intuitive work for over 15 years at least. And I love to mix my intuition with all kinds of things. I am a teacher of energy healing, and so I love to teach sensitive and awakened souls how to be in command of their own energy, develop their intuition so that they can navigate their energetic and their physical world like a boss. So I do that by teaching you how to use self-healing energy tools to help you manage your energy. And I do that by also helping you develop your intuition so that you can see and interpret energy yourself, which helps you to answer any personal question that you may have about yourself, your energy, your life, and apply it in very practical and empowering ways so that you can navigate your experiences with more ease, clarity, and certainty and empowerment. So I love to help people in their personal growth journey and their self-healing journey, and those of you going through a very soulful evolutionary process. So I also love to talk about astrology because I can find it a way that everyone can kind of start to learn about energy, start to tap into the energies, and start to track the energies and become familiar with energy and your energy and the fluctuations in your energy, and just kind of get a bird's eye perspective on what's going on energetically in the collective so that you can have more clarity and just feel more confidence as you navigate your experiences. So if you have any interest in working with me, you can find more information in the description box below. Let's talk about Cancer. Okay, the new moon is in Cancer, and I just want you to know that this chart that I have up here is drawn up from the location is based in Hawaii. So the house system is going to look different depending on your personal chart, but you can still see some of the transits going on and the aspects, the conversation that is happening in these transits in the sky during this time. So the new moon is happening in Cancer. That means it's a new beginning that's happening for us. So let's talk about that Cancer energy because this is where the new beginning, this is kind of the energy that we're working with in this new beginning. Cancer is a cardinal sign, which means that it can really take an initiative in something, can really initiate something. And in this case, you can think about that initiative as like a drop of water falling from the sky into a still pond. You know, it can create this tiny little initiation, can create a ripple effect, it can create change. Okay. And so Cancer is a water sign. So that means that it's emotional and it's intuitive. It's ruled by the moon, which means it's really correlated to our physical body, our feminine energy, um, the mother within us. So it has that very nurturing energy to it. It also has a very subjective reality to it. You know, you think about our unconscious patterns, our subconscious cycles and patterns that we have that we may be aware of or not that play out in a cyclic manner all the time. Um, And this energy of Cancer is very sensitive. It's related to the crab. And if you think about a crab, crab has a very tough exterior because its interior is very sensitive and soft. And so it has to have a very protective container around it to keep it safe. Um, and so do all of us. When we have very soft, sensitive, vulnerable parts of us, we need to have a very safe container. We need to protect that vulnerable part of us in some way. Um, so that's the energy of Cancer and what we're working with in this new beginning. Now, some of the major aspects are going to tell us kind of the flavor of this new beginning. It's like the skies or the astrological energies are kind of handing us a very unique new beginning at this time. And that's what all these transits are kind of showing us. What kind of new beginning are we stepping into right now? And one of the major aspects that I want to talk about is Venus squaring Chiron um, in this new moon. Well, first of all, Venus will be kind of in this wider conjunction with the new moon, which means that its energy is still being blended with that new moon. So Venus is all about beauty and harmony, our even our talents, our values, money, our relationships, our heart, matters of the heart. And Venus is going to be in Cancer during this new moon at 22 degrees, which means it's in about an 8-degree orb of a conjunction with the new moon. So its energies are kind of still blending together, bringing about that kind of glitter feeling, it's bringing about that beauty to this new moon. So it's a beautiful new moon. It has that loving energy infused into it. However, Venus is going to be squaring Chiron in Aries. And so a square brings about kind of that challenging growth. We have to embrace two different energies at the same time. And those energies have one thing in common, which is that they're both cardinal energies, which means they both want to initiate something. So there's two parts of us that want to initiate something, okay, want to spark something, bring life to something, initiate something. But we also have a lot of differences in those two energies. So Cancer is kind of like that new beginning that feels so vulnerable and so sensitive, that it just needs to feel safe. It just needs to be nurtured. And um, that Chiron energy in Aries might be a little bit something like, really wanting to spark something, really wanting something to happen fast, wanting to get results fast, wanting to dive into something head first. And so you can feel the difference in this kind of square, this challenge happening within us in this new beginning. There is a part of us that really just wants those results, like we're getting impatient about it. Dang it, we just need some freaking results, right? We just want to get it done, start something, see results, before we get bored, you know. But this is coming from Chiron, which means it's bringing up our wounds. It's bringing up a potential for us to heal. So let's talk a little bit about Chiron, because that's going to be a major player in this new moon. Chiron is the wounded healer. All right. And so it brings up our wounds to the surface. It allows us this opportunity to become aware of our limited self, the part of us that might be dark and small and weak and stuck in a limited experience, stuck in a limited pattern, something that may be painful, may be harsh, and so when we have Venus squaring Chiron, this is bringing up wounds around our hearts. Okay, so this could be wounds related to our own relationship to ourself. It can be wounds related to our relationship to others. It can be wounds related to how we create, how we desire, how we receive, um, how we attract things, what we can have, what we value. It can bring up wounds related to that. Now, Cancer, having Venus in Cancer is kind of this energy of like valuing our personal connections, wanting to nurture our personal connections, wanting to show love, give love, offer nurturing, right? And then having Chiron in Aries is a little bit more like needing to put our healing first, our individual healing first, needing to make sure that our individual needs are met. So you can feel the challenge of like wanting to nourish our personal relationships, wanting to nurture that, wanting to protect that, wanting to birth some new connection, some new type of connection in our personal relationships, possibly, or personal connections, or something at home that feels at home to us, whether it's our body or our actual home life, or just feeling at home within ourselves. Um, Needing to heal something related to this, something that has hurt in the past, something that has limited us, and needing to grow through this challenge, growing through this challenge of embracing our individual healing and our needs, as well as supporting our personal connections, supporting our home life, supporting our values in our personal relationships, supporting what needs to be nurtured in our personal world. Okay, and so that's kind of the first challenge coming up around this new moon. Now, to kind of dive a little deeper into what's happening with that Venus square Chiron energy, is that Venus is also talking to Uranus. Okay, we have Venus over here in Cancer. I'm not sure if you can see my mouse on the screen, but we have, Venus over here in Cancer. Okay, and then we have Uranus over here in Taurus. Okay, now Taurus is a slow energy. Taurus is a grounded energy. Taurus is physical, it's an earth sign. And so it's like our material world. And we have that sextiling Uranus. Venus is sextiling Uranus. So there's a very helpful, supportive energy here with Uranus. Now, Uranus brings about change, it can bring about disruptions and chaos and awakenings, but it brings about change. And because it's in Taurus, usually the change, that it's asking us to make could be gradual change. It could be slow change. It could be material change. It could be practical, grounded changes that help us enjoy life more, build what we want to build, create more abundance and security, and wealth. Okay, Taurus is ruled by Venus. Venus is going to be in Cancer. And so that changes of a personal matter. The change that we can initiate and the change that we have an opportunity to make can be related to a personal matter, our hearts, for example. We might have a change of heart, for example. But intuitively, what I notice about this is, having a lot of kind of being vulnerable. Being vulnerable, it's kind of like when you have you're playing a card game and you have kind of like you're dealt a hand of cards. And instead of like playing the poker face and hiding your cards and not showing anyone in cards. This is kind of like laying your cards on the table and being able to see what you have there and be like, this is what I have, and these are my options. And this is what I can do in my situation. And what kind of change can I make so that I get the best outcome that helps me enjoy life, that brings more harmony to my physical world and experience, my home life, maybe my personal life. Um, these are my options and these are my choices, and I'm being vulnerable about that. I'm being transparent about that. And let's make some practical decisions or practical choices or practical changes or make some practical action, so that we get the best outcome here. Now, what I mentioned is we do have Venus in a square with Chiron. Now, an interesting thing I want to mention about Chiron is that it's kind of it's kind of in a conjunction with Eris and Hygeia. Those are two kind of like feminine energies right there. I believe they're asteroids. But Eris is kind of like that, um, almost like advocate, almost like like a warrior goddess for feminine energy. And so she can create some chaos and disruptions for the sake of fairness and feminine truth and bringing in that feminine truth. And then, excuse me, Hygeia is a goddess of miraculous healing. So she can take anything and kind of bring it to like a more expanded state, bring it to a higher state, really rebalance it in magical, surprising ways. Um, Hygeia will be at the 29th degree, which might indicate that there's something, really important in this new beginning that we really need to put an emphasis on to heal, to evolve, to bring to kind of a higher expression in some way. Now, um, so we have that conjunction with Chiron. So, I mean, right off the bat, I'm sensing kind of that that creative energy that wants to express itself within us. And it's coming from our feminine energy, but it may have been dormant. It may have just been suppressed in some way. It may have been wounded because we're dealing with Chiron. So we may have some kind of wound that has suppressed our creative energy, that has kept it dormant, that has kept it kind of either dormant or suppressed, or maybe even when it's expressed, it's been just like really diluted or really weak or just like kind of pathetic in some way, or really small in some way. It hasn't been that creative expression that just feels liberated, right? Because we're dealing with like Eris, that goddess, that warrior goddess, and she wants feminine liberation. She wants that truth, for the feminine. And she's willing to kind of create that chaos in order to do it. And so we're definitely healing something. It's kind of like a volcano that has that powerful lava inside of it. And it's just sitting there, and you're kind of like, well, that's really powerful creative energy. But we don't like, how do we channel that? How do we have freedom with that? How do we express that outside of us, in a healthy way, in a positive way, in a way that feels free, and so we might be dealing with some wounds of the heart that are directly correlated with our creative energy. Now, this, because it's related to the heart, that wounding could show up in so many ways. So you can look at your own personal chart, or if you want to book a session with me, I can look at your own personal chart with you, and I can see where this might be showing up for you, like in the context of your own life. But because it's related to the heart, it can be related to our relationships, relationship wounds, wounding between our masculine and feminine energy. It could be related to our desires, and just where we've suppressed our desires, you know, um, and where we could come into more opening, into asking for what we want and actually receiving it, and then expressing our creative energy and actually creating it in a very liberated way. Um, so yeah, so looking at now some other aspects here, we have Mars in sextile to Saturn. Now, Mars is in Taurus, and it's in a conjunction with Uranus. It's actually headed towards um, Uranus, and so it's in about a 6-degree orb at this time, closing in on Uranus. So there's definitely some will and some motivation that's building around taking some physical action, in the material world, in a real way, like in a grounded, practical way. Um, Change that brings, again, tourist themed changes, which could be related to more abundance, more security, more wealth, more harmony. Taurus is ruled by Venus, so more harmony, more balance, more pleasure in the day to day sensual life. Okay. So we might have this energy starting to build around this time, as Mars gets closer to Uranus, of, that willpower or that motivation or that action oriented self of building towards a real change. And because it's in Taurus, it's steady, it's stable, and it might even feel kind of like a slow burn in some way. But that Mars is going to be in a sextile with Saturn. Now, Saturn is over here in Pisces, okay? And Saturn is all about boundaries and structure and putting in the work to get results, and putting in the work, putting in the commitment, doing the training, doing the practice, taking one step at a time so that over time you gain great rewards. It's like a teacher energy. And Mars is in sextile with Saturn, which means there's a support there. you know that means that we have some commitment that we can kind of pull on, some discipline we can pull on, some structures that we can pull on, some boundaries that we can pull on, some ability to focus and put in the work, put in the incremental steps that we need to take so that we can start veering towards this greater change that needs to happen on a physical level. And Saturn is in Pisces. Pisces is a very creative sign. Um, it's a very intuitive sign. It's a water sign, so it's a feminine sign, and it's also a boundless sign. It's a very spiritual sign. It's ruled by Neptune. Um, so, there could be some like spiritual practice or creative practice or some kind of commitment to a creative dream that we have. Pisces are dreamers, they're visionaries, and so there might be some commitment here coming in, some discipline, some structure that we can follow, that we can kind of pull on to help us in this new beginning. Now, something I want to say about Saturn is that it's coming into a conjunction with Neptune at this time. Um, it's got a 10-degree orb in a conjunction. So it's kind of like a very wide conjunction, but we're starting to like feel um, that kind of Saturn energy blending a little bit with that Neptune energy. So something to note about Neptune right now, at this time, is that it's at the 29th degree, and that is a critical degree. What I'm sensing about that is that it's kind of like, in order to secure something, you gotta really make sure you nail it down. Like if you're securing a wooden board on the floor, like a foundation, you really got to make sure that foundation is nailed down, because it's the foundation. And if the foundation isn't strong, then it's going to be something you build or create on a house of cards that can come tumbling down at any time. So I really sense that Saturn is kind of blending its energies with Neptune, which can give us this feeling of restriction on some level, where our creative energy feels restricted, or, our dreams feel restricted, or we're getting these like reality checks around our dreams, and the real work we have to do around them, and the hard work that we might have to do around them. But we're also getting this structure and this discipline and this commitment and this hard work and these foundations and these, you know, real structures that can make sure that, whatever we build is solid. Now, Neptune is very hard to define. And that's because it really dissolves boundaries. It's boundless. It's very multidimensional. It's very mystical and spiritual in some ways. And so it can be very hard to define Neptune because it's undefinable. And so that's why it can bring about confusion. It can bring about illusions and delusions, confusion, and make it really hard to tell what's going on. And, so what I'm sensing about this is that there's something important for us to nail down on a spiritual or creative level. It's like building a foundation. We got to get this right. We got to get this nailed down and secured before we move on. Okay. Otherwise, it might not go so well, you know, farther down the line, in the future, if we don't secure this, if we don't get this nailed down, if we don't address this. Now, another way that this could be showing up with Saturn kind of creeping in on Neptune is that, kind of from more of a spiritual lens, is that Saturn does bring about karma, past life lessons, and necessary, experiences that we need to go through that might be difficult or hard or even cold or harsh at times, but bring about a lot of learning and a lot of wisdom. Um, and so, this could be like that feeling of like that over the next year, because I feel like Neptune is going to be kind of hitting this 29th degree over 2024, 2025-ish. I'd have to look at the astrology, but it's kind of a long-term transit. So we might be going through an experience that is challenging in some way, where we're kind of having to deal with this past stuff, stuff from the past, whether it's karma, whether it's past life stuff, whether it's kind of a spiritual lesson that you really have to get before you move on to the next chapter of your life. But I kind of sense that there's a critical, experience that we have to complete, that we have to finish, that we have to get, we have to integrate on some level, we have to embody on some level before we move on. Before we move on, I really feel like Saturn and Pisces, doesn't allow us to just, you know, to get lost in la la land. It really kind of forces us to embody, our spirituality in a real way. And so there might be some level of embodiment that we just absolutely have to nail down before we move forward. And we're starting to feel that energy. It might, it's starting to percolate there, starting to simmer. I just want to see if there's anything else I want to talk about in regards to this Mars kind of in a sextile to Saturn. Pallas Athena will be trining Saturn, which is always beautiful here because Pallas Athena is that another warrior goddess. She's really diplomatic. She's really strategic. She's a great planner. She's a great counselor kind of energy. Um, And she's in Scorpio, so there's a lot of that deep, intuitive, emotional, psychological kind of strategizing and understanding and planning and counseling that just naturally flows in. So I just feel like there's a natural intuition that just flows right in, you know, to help us with this new moon, because there's kind of a loose conjunction, a loose trine going on here with Saturn and Venus. Um, the moon, the sun, and Venus have kind of like this trine with Saturn. So I just feel like there's a natural psychic or intuitive or really deep kind of support that's coming in to help us bring some kind of structure or boundaries or maturing um, to our hearts, you know, at that time. Another interesting thing I want to mention is that um, Neptune is going to be in a sextile to Pluto. Okay, so Neptune is over here in Pisces at that 29th degree, and it's going to be in a sextile with Pluto. So really what I'm sensing with this new moon is kind of like a oyster. Um, an oyster has a very hard shell, okay, and it's really hard to open. It has to be in a very safe environment for that oyster to kind of like open and kind of bring in some of that water and like filter it and things like that. And so what I sense about um, you know, Neptune and sextile to Pluto. Pluto is kind of like an energetic opening, is kind of what I see here. It's kind of like prying open that oyster shell to reveal something that's very powerful, but also very vulnerable at the same time, because we're dealing with a Cancer new moon, you know? And so I feel like there's something inside of us that's wounded, that is being opened up, because underneath that wound, it is so creative and it is so powerful, and it needs to come out. You know, it needs to come out for our own evolution, because Pluto is all about evolution and transformation, and it will take us into, um, you know, the dark corners of our energy, the underworld of our energy, so that we can confront what is controlling us, what is dominating us, um, what is, you know, the limiting our power, you know, and move through our fears and transcend our fears and evolve into a higher state of coming into our power, um, being empowered, you know. And you know, Pluto is in Aquarius, the collective, and so Aquarius is an air sign. This could be related to our mental body. We could be having some kind of psychological shift, you know, in our mental bodies around this time, that help us to dissolve the boundaries around this wounding and really allow a big creative release to happen, or a big creative opening to happen, or initiate this, you know, initiate that creative opening that needs to happen, that is actually really freaking powerful, you know. Um, you know, when we're dealing with our wounds, like we've got Chiron, you know, in a square with Venus. When we're dealing with our wounds, um, you know, our wounds can make us feel like dark and weak and tiny and helpless, right? But oftentimes, when we heal our wounds and we finally transcend them, we go through cycles, like spiral cycles that transcend these wounds. And in each spiral, it's kind of like walking up a spiral staircase. Each time we come to a new level of perceiving that wound, and we begin to transcend it until we integrate it, you know. And the way we integrate it is we open up, we purge that wound, and then we integrate that wounded part of us, which means that wounded part of us, it dies, because we can no longer live in that wounded reality. It's not true. It's limiting us. It's a lie. We have so much more potential outside of that wound. And when we integrate it, it allows us to come into a new version of ourselves, a new beginning of how we see ourselves, how we create in the world, how we experience the world. And oftentimes, under our wounds are the greatest gold mines of wisdom and the greatest gold mines of our gifts, of our talents, of our strengths that that got hurt, that got wounded, that got distorted. Um, and when they're healed, they're amazing. They're incredible. They have so much value, right? And so with Venus squaring, Chiron, it's like, you know what, this heart of ours, this wound that we have, there's actually so much value in it. We got to let it go. We got to open it up. We got to let it go, because underneath it, it might be very sensitive and vulnerable, but it's powerful. It is so powerful when it comes to creating our dreams and embodying who we need to be to create our dreams. Okay. So beautiful energy in this new moon. I do want to talk a little bit about the healing process for some of you that aren't really familiar with that healing process, because there's a difference between, healing and feeling better and deep healing. And that's not necessarily going to make you feel better when you're in the middle of deep healing. And we've been in a lot of this chironic energy, since like March and April during that new moon eclipse, which is like a 6-month window of like that chironic energy, and so we've been doing some deep healing. Okay, it's not that type of healing that feels good. It's that type of healing that, you're going through deep changes and you're not really seeing results yet. Or you might be going through big changes and you're not quite seeing like the happy results yet, and it's kind of like sacrificing, short-term, um, short-term pleasure for long-term balance, long-term stability, long-term wisdom, long-term gain. When you're doing deep healing, it might feel destabilizing. It might feel dark and heavy, and you might feel lost, and you might feel horrible, and you might um, not know what's going on, not be clear about things. It can be very messy when you're doing a deep healing, and you might not really understand why or how or what is going on, because it's deep. And so you don't necessarily get immediate results in your outer world. It can be delayed, those results, but it can lead to very big change that ultimately reflects that deep healing, which obviously will be more aligned and supportive of you in the long run. But that's kind of what we've all been going through collectively, is kind of these deep changes, these deep healings, um, and seeing that it's um, Neptune is in sextile with Pluto. We could be having some psychological, mental dissolving of old power and control structures in our brain that are dissolving, that allow us to open our hearts more and come into our hearts more and really be more creative. So let's talk a little bit more about some extra things happening around this new moon in Cancer. And one of those things is Mercury. I found interesting. Mercury is going to be in Leo. So that's a very expressive energy. Leo is ruled by the sun. The sun will be in Cancer. And so we are going to be expressing a very vulnerable side of us, a side of us that is intuitive, soft, gentle, nurturing, loving. Okay. And maybe even indirect, used to being more indirect. And we're trying to express something here. Um, um, Leo is very expressive. It can be like dramatic in that very entertaining way. It can be showy, but it also has a beautiful way of shining our light, expressing our gifts and talents, like taking that stage, being seen, right? And it is conjunct Vesta. Vesta is I don't remember if it's an asteroid or a dwarf planet, but Vesta is a feminine goddess that's all about sexual healing and sisterhood and that's sacred sexual healing. And so when I'm talking about sexual healing, it can be literal, like your sexuality. It could be like like healing that, but it can also be healing that relationship between the masculine and the feminine. But what I sense here with you know, this feminine energy of Vesta conjuncting Mercury is like the feminine wants to express and be seen. She wants to be seen in her talents, in her gifts, in her wisdom, in her magic, like in all the beautiful things that she can offer to the world. She wants to shine brighter. She wants to shine like a diamond and express herself. And that is going to be so healing for her to be seen. So I sense that there's something so vulnerable in our hearts that needs to open and heal and release to allow our light to come in so that we can express ourselves in a brighter way, so that we can really shine and communicate and express our true feminine nature, which is beautiful, which is gifted, which is talented, which something creative that needs to be expressed in a brighter way, that needs to be seen out in the world. So I just thought that was a beautiful energy right there that I wanted to talk about. Um, we also have Jupiter in sextile to the North Node. Okay, so Jupiter will be in Gemini. North Node is still in Aries. And so, we're going to be resourced with a lot of information, a lot of options, a lot of learning. There's going to be um, plenty of intellectual resources at our hand to learn, to grow, to expand in the direction that we need to expand in. We also have Vesta, that's going to be in sextile to Jupiter. Um, so there's some support coming in from Jupiter, some really beautiful expansion that we can go through around the way we express our feminine energy, and how we can really do that um, in a way that involves our intellect, in a way that's very interesting, in a way that's very entertaining and curious and maybe even youthful, expressive, that really lands well socially, as well, where we can be seen socially as well. We also have Persephone. Persephone is that asteroid goddess. That's all about taking, it's like a feminine energy that really initiates us into maturity and authority, whether we feel ready for it or not. Persephone starts as this youthful maiden type of energy, and she goes through a crisis that brings her into the depths of herself and confronts her naivety and her innocence, and has to go through a maturing process that brings her into her feminine authority and her feminine power. And she's in Sagittarius, which means we've got this feminine energy that's confronting our relationship to truth and freedom and our broad perspective, our broad spiritual or philosophical perspective on things. And we're going through a maturing process in our relationship to our ability to learn and grow and expand and go on a spiritual adventure and, tap into new truths and more freedom. But we have to confront some things to do that. And so Persephone is going to be in sextile with the South Node. And the South Node is in Libra. And so we we've been purging a lot, with Libra, a lot of relationship dynamics, a lot of old relationship dynamics, old values, old imbalances regarding the way we show up for other people. We've been purging it. So people have been purging just relationship dynamics, going through big transformations in their relationships. A lot of people have let go of relationships. Some relationships have left our lives. We've ended some relationships. So when I see this sextile with the South Node, it really feels like a beautiful perspective that Persephone is providing us, like a broad perspective on some of these things that we've released and purged in our lives from our past that we've let go of, and kind of the enlightenment of it, like how that is helping us to come more into our truth, how that's helping us to have more freedom and liberation in our lives, how that's helping us to come into more of our wisdom and our authority and in our feminine energy. And so we've got a beautiful perspective coming in around that. It feels validating. Like we can see the magic of all the healing that we've been doing in this new moon. All right, some other things I want to mention real quick that might be interesting here. I want to talk about Lilith because Lilith is at an interesting degree during this new moon. Lilith is at 0 degrees. She's just entering Libra. So 0 degrees is a very interesting degrees because it's kind of like this, um, you know, like very innocent energy of Libra. And so this could represent that really pure part of us, very innocent part of us that is aware of the other person, that is aware of the other person and just wants to, have a good, harmonious, relationship with the other person, having an awareness of the other person and their needs and their values and how to relate to someone else, and just a very innocent, open energy around, like I want to please you. I want us to be happy. I want you to be happy. I want us to be happy. But Lilith is all about our feminine, um, the dark side of the feminine. And so that just means, the subconscious, the feminine subconscious, the hidden parts of our feminine that can be wounded and unhealed and imbalanced or, small in some way. And we have that in an opposition to Neptune. Um, we have Lilith in a quincunx with Hygeia. And so I'm just kind of sensing that there's an irritation that could be coming up, around the feminine side of us, that needs some things to be smoothed out. But when we smooth it out, it creates magic. It's like, whoa, that creates such a huge difference. So I want to what it reminds me of is like, where those things that just those tiny things that aren't working for us, that over time can create a lot of frustration. But when we make small adjustments, it can create so much more like harmony and relief, and really turn something that was frustrating and not working for us into something that totally works. And it's just a small adjustment. It's just when we unlock that insight about what we actually need that we can adjust, boy, do we have this flow of energy of where both our personal connections and our personal relationships and our individual needs and our individual healing can really flow together at the same time in an equal way, can coexist together, can cooperate with one another. So it reminds me of like, if you're doing like yoga and let's say you're doing like a position over and over and over again, but let's say you're holding your hand the wrong way, and over time it starts to create an injury in your wrist. But if you adjust the position of your hand, you can over time completely prevent an injury from happening. And so it kind of reminds me of that kind of level of frustration. There's something nagging us, there's something that might be frustrating or annoying to us. And it's just something we need to have an insight around to help us smooth out, initiate some healing, initiate some changes so that we can have more harmony between us and other people, for the sake of our um, creative experiences, creative energy, for the sake of our creations, you know. So overall, I see the challenges to this new moon, which involves like an energetic opening and like, you know, being vulnerable and allowing our hearts to open and to bring a lot of love and softness as we open. And where we're having a creative opening that allows us to really embody and evolve and embody what we need to embody to create what we want and to express and be seen in new ways. So, just a very beautiful new moon here. All right, guys, I might be throwing out some little insights here and there that might not be in this video on Instagram. So you can always follow me over there at Realization Hub. And again, if you have um, any need to receive clarity, to work through your own personal growth, to understand your own energy dynamics, to heal, to develop your intuition, or to manage your own energy, to take some classes, you know where to find me. Um, all right, so I wish you a very tender, loving, and conscious new moon, and the best to you in your own healing. Okay, take care, everyone. Bye.